I've always wanted to come to Brazil. Anyone who's interested in traveling wants to come to Brazil. Anyone that's interested in football wants to come to Brazil. And what was interesting for me was not to go to Rio first, not to go to Sao Paulo, not to go to what might be regarded as the obvious destinations for Brazil, to come to a place, to be honest, I'd never heard of. It's the third biggest city in Brazil, and I hadn't heard of it before I came here. So that was very interesting for me. It was fascinating to come to a place with such a fascinating colonial history. I've traveled some of the world, I've seen some fascinating places, but I don't think I've ever been to a country that's had such an amazing history and such a complex history, and such a history that is apparent in the food. That, I think, has been most striking. Every dish I've eaten has a link with the culture of this part of Brazil, has a link with the history of this part of Brazil. And if you want to understand the history of Brazil, eat the food. That's all you need to do. Eat the food, and the stories are in the food. You know, whether it's kale imported by the Portuguese, whether it's rice and beans, the staple diet from slave times, whether it's pork or chicken, animals that were easy to rear, whether it's beef that was brought in at a later stage, the food is full of history. And you know, it's a food that isn't well known, because a lot of people confuse, it's interesting, people confuse Portuguese culture with Brazilian culture. Now, while there are definite links between Portugal and Brazil, also Brazil has its own unique development, and that's what I found most interesting. I always knew I was going to come to Brazil. I'm now sure I'm going to come back again and again and again. So much, such a big country.